Mitinda, hello and welcome again to Kroeder Kroghen. And as I promised you last week, today's programme is mostly about Australians, Cornish Australians, and in particular about those Australians who are speaking Cornish and using Cornish every day. Quite an extraordinary event. Australia's been much in the news recently, of course, with Crocodile Dundee and bicentennial celebrations and so on, but for many Cornish families, Australia is always in the news because Cornwall and Australia have long and deep family connections. Cornwall and the rest of the world have long and deep family connections. It's to do, of course, as most people know, with the exodus that began in 1850, really, was the earliest, when Cornish miners began to look elsewhere for work. In particular, the Californian gold rush and the gold rush that took place in Australia, which is less well known, led to many Cornish miners seeking their fortunes abroad. Some went to America, to the copper mines in Michigan, and there are still many families of Cornish extraction in the Michigan area. The Vivians, for example, transferred their entire works from Camborne to Pittsburgh in the 1850s. But it wasn't really until about 16 years later, 1866 precisely, that the emigration began on a very large scale. That was the first real tin crisis. We've had another one recently since, of course. But during 1866, it's said that up to 5,000 miners actually left Cornwall during that 1 year alone. And in 1867, even more left. And they went all across the world, to the United States, to South America, to South Africa, and to Australia. The legend being, of course, that wherever in the world there is a hole sunk in the ground, you will be sure to find a Cornishman at the bottom of it searching for metal of some kind. As Effie Halliday describes it beautifully in his History of Cornwall, houses were empty in the little towns. On the moors, cottages were crumbling, their hard-won fields and gardens reverting to waste. Couch grass and bracken were obliterating the old mule tracks, and ivy crept up the pointing fingers of the silent engine houses. Well, wherever they went in the world, those Cornish left their mark. I was interested to read in today's newspaper the story, remarkable in itself, of a successful operation to separate two Siamese twins in a hospital in Soweto, in South Africa. And the name of the hospital is Baragwanath. And of course, Baragwanath is a Cornish word. It means wheaten bread. Bara is Cornish for bread. And there are examples all across the world of the Cornish heritage, Cornish language, Cornish customs, and the pasty being remembered and honoured by families of Cornish stock. And those expatriates of Cornish stock who are most involved in the Cornish language movement are certainly continued through the years. Just last week, a chap called Dave Perry, who is in fact from the Iluggan area, has been back visiting relatives in the Camborne, Poole, Redruth area, having been in Australia for the last 39 years. And there's an article in last week's Camborne Packet about his return visit. He, like many who have made the move to Australia, is full of the delights and wonders of that country, and although he was very pleased to come home and see his relations, he is now very firmly an Australian, a Cornish Australian. Well, of course, there are quite a few Cornish people who have also been to Australia to visit relatives, friends, and in particular to see the communities which are of Cornish stock in Australia, most of them in New South Wales or in South Australia. Brenda Wootton has been one of those who went, and in honour of the visit, Dick Gendel wrote her a song called Cornish Australian.
With me pack on me back, me pasty in me hand, I'm just a cousin John, droving through the land, and I hope with you'll agree it's a great thing to be Cornish Australian, just like me. I've a notion you don't know me as well as you might say, though I'm proud of the country from Tasman to Shark Bay. I in me hand. I'm just a cousin Jack, who's roving through the land, and I hope you'll agree it's a great thing to be Cornish Australian just like me.
Cornish Australian, just like me. Well, those Australians who are of Cornish stock are very, very keen to investigate their family ties. And there is, in fact, an Australian organisation, an Australian representative, for the Cornish Guild of Heralds. His name is John Billing, and he lives in Queensland. And he wrote recently to the local Cornish press asking for reader support in sending information about family histories, photographs, slides, pamphlets, brochures, maps, anything of a Cornish nature that might be of interest to families descended from Cornish families. The motto of the project is Perpetuitas Cornubia. That's the Australian Bicentennial Project, and it's aimed at collecting all matters Cornish throughout Australia, including pedigrees and coats of arms and so on. Now, if you would like to get in touch with Mr. Billing, his address is Box 5217, Rockhampton Mail Centre, Queensland 4702. And I'll give you that address again at the end of the programme in case you didn't get it this time. The Cornish Australians who settled around Munta and Wallaroo and Cadina have never forgotten their roots and never abandoned many of the traditions. But in recent years, they've actually gone further than that. They have very deliberately resurrected their Cornish identity in a series of festivals, which they call simply An Lowender Kernewek. The Cornish Lowender means literally happiness or joy. I'm not quite sure when the first of the Lowender Kernewek festivals took place, though I know the third was in 1981 and that the fifth was in 1985. Well, now something even more unusual and interesting has happened. Ron Dorr, writing from Australia, has sent a report in Cornish to the Cornish monthly magazine An Ganas about happenings in Australia, and in particular about this, An Kinza Canteles Berthan Orseth Kerno in Mason Vamvro, the first meeting of bards of the Cornish Gorseth outside An Vamvro, the mother country. And this is quite an extraordinary event. It's unusual enough that there should be enough bards in Australia to make it possible for such a meeting to be held. The meeting was organised by Coethus Kernewek Victoria, the Cornish Association of Victoria, and the meeting was held at Ballarat. I think that's how that's pronounced. And according to Ron's report, the banners of all the different organisations decorated the event colourfully. Bannero Coethazo Victoria, South Australia, ha South Cumbra knoweth, a Drenidja the Borth and Kelch. South Cumbra knoweth, New South Wales. August had dew ganza dúzerig dos the Virazorten Solemnita. Around 200 people came to look at the ceremony, and this was the first time that most of them had ever seen the blue bardic robes and posio barthic glas. Now Barth Kerno a Gerdas Dagaleo and Kelch, 9 bards of Cornwall, walked to their places in the circle. Kinsbarth Mur Trevanion a Hembronkis and Solemnita. Former Grand Bard Trevanion led the ceremony. A Pedua Barth Australiac, Alice Cameres Nibran and Dolan, and 4 Australian bards could take some part in the programme. And remember, of course, that those ceremonies are held entirely in Cornish. Cano Onorseth of Kennis in Kernewek. The Gorseth hymn was sung in Cornish. Gans Bagas Duworth Friars Town, Guerreses Gans Telenores, by a group from Friarstown, helped by a harpist. And on the Saturday evening, De Sadon Gorthuawith, the first Sintius Anessa Canteles and Unions Australic Coethazo Kernewek, was held the first meeting of the Australian Union of Cornish Fellowships, and Unions Australic Coethazo Kernewek, Hagawodja tea, pasty, haneb keskan viwick. And they had pasty, well, you know what that means, and keskan viwick, lively song. And lastly, Ron's report concludes with news that in Mis May, Milno Kansnoha Pedwarigans, in the month of May in 1989, a 5th St. the Munta, they will be held in Munta, Drezen Lendukarek, and Nessa Omganteles Bardek in Mesa Gerno, the second meeting of bards outside Cornwall. Y chwaetur yn ffrith, nebys berth arol, the alws dos tham ginniganen in chwarfos arbennig ma. And Ron concludes by hoping that some other bards will be able to make the journey to Australia to join in that event. Well, it's a long way to go, but of course, lots of Cornish people do travel to Australia to maintain those old and important ties and connections that Cornwall has with the land of Down Under. And of course, it's Down Under by Men at Work that I shall play you out with this week instead of the normal tune. But just before I do, a reminder again of that address, if you've got pencil and paper handy. This is from the Australian representative of the Cornish Guild of Heralds, who would like any information, please, photographs, slides, pamphlets, brochures, maps, anything of a Cornish nature, pedigrees, coats of arms, crests, symbols, banners, marks, etc., to those families who are living in Australia of Cornish extraction. His name is John Billing, Box 5217, Rockhampton Mail Centre, R-O-C-K-H-A-M-P-T-O-N, Rockhampton Mail Centre, Queensland 4702. Queensland 4702, Australia.